Useless Monster by Mute Crows, Chapter 12, or Chapter 11. Guys? Did you not hear All Might say we needed to go back? Rebecca asked from across the room, voice nervous. Bakugo didn't budge. Dude, we don't have time for a ball. Let's go. Shinzo spotted Bakugo's fist. The glare immediately shifted toward the tall kid, and Bakugo thumped Izuku against the ground before storming off in a string of curses and vulgarities. He sagged against the floor with a sigh and pressed the triggers to retract his claws. Uraraka cleared her throat from the pillar she was tied to. Can you guys untie me, please? Shinzo held a hand out to Izuku that he took with a soft thanks and allowed himself to be pulled up, bad arm tucked once again. He shrugged and walked over to Uraraka with Izuku following to offer a hand. Okay, you weren't doing anything other than walking at this point, Midoriya. Shinzo eyed the way Izuku had a slight limp and was still blinking rapidly every few moments. What even happened after I left, Deku? Uraraka looked him over, clearly worried, as Shinzo quickly untied her and started rewinding the capture tape. Exactly what I said would. Bakugo came after me and only me. Izuku ignored the ringing in his ears and throbbing ache in his muscles. He shouldn't have pushed it with climbing the wall, but he had to, or else he would have failed the trial pointlessly after Uraraka had tried her best on her end. You didn't say that he would be so severe in how he went after you, though. Uraraka stood and paced around him as she took in the scrapes, burns, and broken bones. This isn't anything new from him on levels of intensity for me. He shrugged with his good shoulder and started toward the stairs to get to return to the class. Dude. Shinzo had stopped rewinding the tape and gave him an incredulous look, following after him. That doesn't make it any better. Even yesterday, Aizawa-sensei said the self-sacrificial bullcrap wasn't going to be allowed, and you still tried something. Aizawa-sensei said I couldn't cripple myself and expect rescue. He didn't say I couldn't push my limits that I am already aware of. Both classmates exchanged a look that could probably be described as, is this kid serious? Wild? Losing his mind? As they followed him. The stairs were not kind to his shoulder as they jostled it with every step. He bit his tongue to keep from making any noises and continued to make his way to the spectator bay. He didn't answer any more questions or anything that the two were asking or talking about, such as how a broken shoulder was a limit he was already aware of. As they entered the building and were walking down the hall to the bay, Uraraka quietly asked a question one last time. Are you sure you're going to be okay, Deku? He sighed softly and stood to the side so they could enter the room first. Yeah, Recovery Girl is on campus and I have a healing quirk, remember? It's fine, so don't worry. Asking someone not to worry was a weird thing to do, different from his usual silent hopes that anyone would even think to worry in the first place. It was uncomfortable, but not in a bad way. Shinzo pushed open the door and immediately there was a commotion! Did you really break your arm, dude? Are you insane? That was so manly affair to put it in the sun right now! Class, settle down! All Might called over the shouts, holding his hands out and gesturing for them to calm down. They went silent near instantly, but they were all watching Izuku closely. It made him feel cornered and jittery, too many eyes studying him. All except for Bakugo, who was against the far wall, glaring at the screens. Izuku stood still just inside the doorway, even as Shinzo wandered off to be out of the crowd, and Uraraka turned from the edges of the crowd to give him a questioning look. Young Midoriya, why did you take the earpiece out? All Might walked through the class and leveled him a concerned look. Izuku pulled the earpiece out of his pocket and held it out. It broke when I hit the wall. It was just static and I didn't want to lose it. He offered it to All Might without actually looking at him. I'm very sorry, Sensei. Dude, you didn't throw yourself at the wall, so why are you apologizing? A boy with black hair, he thinks his name was Sero from the team selections, tilts his head in confusion. He just shrugs with one shoulder and drops the broken thing into All Might's palm. You will need to get that shoulder treated as soon as possible, so go ahead, Recovery Girls. I can come by her office after class to cover what we discussed about your match. Izuku nodded and hurried out of the room, even as the class quickly erupted again in comments about the match that were soon muffled by the door closing. He wandered slowly to Recovery Girl's, thoughts preoccupied. He didn't know if the earpiece was something that was a planned expense at the school or if he would have to cover it out of pocket. He didn't even have anything in pocket to use for it. The drop in healing speed while in his human form was also bothering him. There wasn't any way he knew of that would accelerate this through training. He's broken his body for others enough times to know that just taking in the injuries and allowing them to heal didn't increase the speed. It was just a health-based thing, and he was about as healthy as one can be when living on the streets, in his own opinion. He sighed, staring at the door to the nursing office, then knocked gently.
Come in.
Izuku couldn't really help the rolling guilt at the frustrated huff she let out at the sight of him. He shuffled into the room and closed the door gently behind himself.
Get on the cot, Midoriya-kun.
She left her desk and walked around to a small storage cabinet, pulling out bandages and a sling. He quietly did as told and sat on the cot. Recovery Girl rambled softly as she went around the room grabbing what she needed. He watched her and considered his options going forward. If Bakugo was going to be his classmate again for the next 3 years, the world never let him escape the routine bullying from that kid, then he would need multiple contingency plans. Plans that would have to consider any possible future lessons, meaning it difficult to make ones.
Take off your mouth guard and neck piece, kiddo. Also, tell your designer on the next adjustment that the edges of the neck piece become abrasive at high temperatures.
She brought her things to his cot and sat in the stool in front of him.
Let me see your arm.
It's my shoulder. He picked at his costume nervously after doing as she asked. I'm confident it's broken. A tisk, and she went about undoing the front of his costume, gently uncovering his shoulder. It was bruised and sitting horribly wrong now that the costume wasn't holding it in place. Taking off his glove, she pulled the sleeve down more to bandage it securely. He gripped his pant leg and bit his tongue to stop from making noise. When she had him all packed and arm in a sling, she pressed firmly against his chest.
Lie down and rest. But I will write you a pass for the rest of your classes. Right now I can't heal you because you don't have the energy for it. Eat these gummies and get some sleep.
Recovery Girl dropped a handful of gummies into his good hand as he laid back at the cot. He stared at the ceiling, dropping the gummies into his mouth and eating them slowly. When she cleared her throat pointedly, he closed his eyes. He knew full well he wouldn't get any sleep, though. The buzzing energy running through his body, unneeded alerts to be wary, would keep him from getting any real rest. Muscle memory shouting fear at the fact that he was in essence contained to one place that was not easily escapable. Being cornered was dangerous. Being injured was dangerous. Vulnerability was easily taken advantage of in the world of survival for any party at play. These are lessons drilled into him just by trying to make it week to week. It has him thrumming with anxiety. Even with Recovery Girl tapping away at her keyboard and scribbling down something on papers, the mere fact that he couldn't actively see what was around him left him feeling exposed. After some period of time, she approached him and a gentle kiss to his arm left a minimal glow deep in his shoulder. He could feel the way his bones started patching themselves halfway before stopping. The minimal actual energy he had was sapped away, and yet he stayed just as alert, eyes still closed. The approach of Yagi's burning pain in his lung had Izuku grasping desperately for the familiarity, taking away some of the pain as he took hold of the feeling. He clears his throat as quietly as he can, not wanting the extra attention that would come with coughing up any kind of blood. Yagi didn't bother knocking as he entered the room, sighing softly in a way that Izuku felt tug uncomfortably at his lung.
All right.
Recovery Girl's clipped tone was surprising enough that Izuku looked over at them. She was sitting with arms crossed, staring Yagi down in a way that oozed frustration.
Recovery Girl,
I know you have quite the bleeding heart, All Might, but this is just reckless. There is in no way any kind of justification for having allowed it to get this far. You have worked long enough to know what a broken shoulder looks like, even from a camera's view. I can't heal him with how exhausted he is right now. What do you expect will happen with...
Izuku cleared his throat again loud enough that Recovery Girl stopped her lecturing and looked back at him.
So, Recovery Girl is one of your select few, Yagi-san?
He gave him a questioning look. The question was redundant, considering that Recovery Girl was literally calling him All Might directly, but the lecturing was making him feel even more restless. Her eyes widened slightly at the usage of an actual name.
Yes. Recovery girl hadn't handed much of my care in terms of my surgeries and aftercare. Even still, she is in charge of my checkups, my boy.
Yagi walked over and sat on the cot next to him.
When you told me you found a successor, I didn't think you meant you had already passed it along, All Might.
Recovery girl leveled him with a flat look, even as she settled on her stool again.
I expected that you would inform me of the whole situation.
Apologies, Madonia was a large portion of my schedule for a good while with how we had to prepare him for the entrance exams. I didn't have much free time.
Recovery girl narrowed her eyes at Yagi critically. He cuffed it to his fist and cleared his throat before turning to Izuku.
When did you last eat? You haven't traded bento with me at all recently.
It was a very blatant attempt to change the topic, and Izuku let out a breath of laughter.
I grabbed 2 onigiri from a convenience store last night. The manager gives me a discount if I come in when he's on the clock.
Yagi looked quietly saddened by the information. Recovery girl, on the other hand, looked all the more frustrated with the man.
I have a bento to swap with you if you come to the teacher's lounge after school. I also brought one for lunch today that I can bring here after changing out of this.
He gestured to the hero costume he was still wearing.
Okay, thank you, Yagi-san.
You mean to tell me this boy isn't even eating regularly on his own? Has the school been given waiver forms?
Recovery girl waved her syringe-shaped cane vaguely, clearly frustrated by the lack of actions taken by Yagi and himself. The two lapsed into a much less noisy back and forth of scolding, apologies, and information exchange. The steady volume, mixed with the comforting awareness of Yagi's presence, was nice. So much so that Izuku just closed his eyes again to listen. The rhythm of speaking becomes soothing to the point that he, miraculously, drifted off into sleep. Izuku woke with a silent gasp, the flickering ghosts of his dreams leaving him, taking with them the flashes and heat and bursts of confusion and hurt that he didn't quite understand. He looked over at the side table next to him and saw a carefully wrapped bento waiting, small dragons dancing across the cloth that wrapped it where it sat on top of his uniform. A small smile settled on his face and he let out the breath he had been holding. He sat up to find the sling off, but he could clearly feel how it was still not healed. At least not completely. It will do. He has a small job he had to do around 7, but thankfully wouldn't require too much lifting. The clock on the wall said it was already 4, which means school has been out for a little under an hour at this point, and he still needed to get to the teacher's lounge to meet Yagi like he said he would. Recovery girl wasn't in the room at the moment, and her computer was idle, which means she probably left a little bit ago. She was probably going to be returning soon, since a small handbag was resting on the desk still. It was an opportunity he was going to take advantage of, not wanting to talk any more than needed after the healing she helped along. He was grateful for it, that wasn't under any sort of doubt, but it had him feeling murky and distant with his exhaustion. So he quickly changed and folded his hero costume on the cot before dipping out of the room. Her office was in a small wing that wasn't exactly close to the teacher's lounge. Izuku watched a few clouds out the windows he passed as he strode towards the main building, taking a small tangent to grab his backpack from the thankfully empty classroom. He put the bento into the bag and pulled it over his good shoulder carefully as he walked back to the main lobby of the school. Once there, he felt around for the muffled ache that was Yagi, having pushed his limits with One for All. A feeling similar to how it feels when a muscle is stretched just a little too much that he was used to get the general direction for where to go. There weren't many students left in the halls as clubs had yet to really start, and he somehow had yet to pass any real staff either. The door to the lounge felt unwelcoming to him. Years of never being able to truly rely on teachers having built this innate discomfort with any kind of direct search he has had to make to contact them. He took a deep breath and gently opened the door. A few teachers he didn't recognize looked up for a second before returning to what they were doing. One he did recognize, though, was wagging his way, focused on her phone more than anything.
Midnight-sensei?
He raised his hand slightly and stepped into the lounge a bit more. She looked up at him and smiled as she put her phone into the bag she was carrying.
Can I help you? Do you know where I can find Yagi-san?
He looked past her in the general direction. He could feel the ache, but he must be around a corner or behind some of the computers because Izuku couldn't actually see him. The immediate, almost drab smile, surprised look, and attraction of multiple pairs of eyes turning to focus on him said he may have slipped up somehow. I just thought asking for All Might wouldn't get an honest response since he's out of time. He told me to look for him here after school. Izuku tried his best not to fidget under the gaze of half of the lounge. This was a mistake. He should have just bailed and gone straight to work. He's over there by the kitchenette. She pointed toward where he felt the ache. Just around the corner. Thank you. He hurried past her and pointedly didn't pay attention to how his skin prickled under her continued watch. He walked around the corner and purposefully out of sight with such a rush that he nearly barreled straight into Yagi.
Whoa there, young Midoriya.
He lifted his steaming cup up and out of the way without spilling whatever was in it in a fluid motion. Izuku almost reached out to grab at the edge of his jacket but stopped halfway. Instead, he focused on trying not to let the panic of every one of the heroes in the room staring him down until this moment mess up his breathing too much. Yagi set his drink down on the counter next to them, concern in his eyes.
Is everything okay?
Yeah, I asked Midnight where you were and used your name. I don't think it was as smart of a move as I had hoped. I didn't think she would tell me the truth if I asked for All Might since you were out of time. Izuku glanced back towards the main of the lounge.
I see. Well,
he turned and went to the fridge and pulled out a bento box that was wrapped in a rabbit-patterned cloth.
Take this and we can leave the lounge.
Izuku accepted the bento, holding it carefully in both hands, and ran his fingers over the cloth just to have something to do. Yagi picked his cup back up and patted his shoulder gently as he started to walk off. He made sure to follow closely.
Are you feeling better after some rest? I was surprised you actually fell asleep in Recovery Girl's room.
He took a sip of his drink, humming in a satisfied way with it. I have to head out soon, though, if I want to make it to clock in on time. It felt dismissive with how quickly he said it, but Izuku was on a schedule that very much so directly influenced his livelihood. His mentor looked as if he felt the urgency himself and almost choked on his drink. He waved him off quickly.
Don't let me make you late then, my boy. Go on, and I will see you tomorrow.
Izuku nodded and waved bye, thanking Yagi quietly before quickly walking out into the hall. The lack of subtle stares was a relief as he felt his body relax ever so slightly. The halls were just as quiet as he hurries towards the front doors, only to be held up by the approaching feeling of burning eyes. He debated making some tangents to dodge his teacher, but he genuinely didn't have much wiggle room time-wise to do that. So he watched the ground intently in hopes that maybe he would be able to just walk past without interruption. A quiet grumble said otherwise, though.
Midoriya.
Izuku stopped immediately and did his best to not duck his head at all or make any motions that would give away how badly he wanted to hide under the frustrated look. He wasn't sure if the frustration was at him or just in general, and he really hoped it wasn't the first.
Is the behavior I just saw while reviewing the battle trials to be expected between you and Bakugo in the future?
He bristled internally at the way it was worded, like he had a play into the way Bakugo treated him, as if he had any influence on his long former friend in any way, shape, or form. He locked eyes with Aizawa, carefully defensive. Ask Bakugo. I was on the defensive pretty much that entire time. He came after me, Aizawa-sensei, not the other way around. They watched each other carefully for a beat before Aizawa grunted and continued walking past Izuku. He didn't need any encouragement to practically run out of the building. Work would be a welcome, routine-based relief after today.